Have you ever wondered to yourself, what have I been doing with my whole life? You think back to when you were a child, to a question you were asked constantly. What do you want to be when you grow up? What did you say? Was it a writer, a photographer, a movie star, a doctor, an astronaut? You had an idea of what you wanted to do, of who you wanted to be. You had a dream, and you would spend countless hours and days honing your craft, learning as much as possible about this dream, imagining yourself in a spacesuit or on the stage with the cameras rolling, visualizing the person you wanted to be, and dreaming of the day when it would come true. But somewhere along the way, your dream faded. You grew up being told it was too impractical, to be more realistic. And eventually you even began to tell yourself that as well. And it got forgotten. What was born in the child's world of creativity and imagination got abandoned in the hustle and bustle of the adult's world, where there are bills to pay, mouths to feed, in the cutthroat corporate world where it's eat or be eaten. Over time, climbing the corporate ladder and the daily grind became the new norm, and childish things like dreams were cast aside. Until one day you realize you're in your 30s and so far away from the person you thought you would be. If you can relate to this sentiment, you can begin to understand the man known as Mutta. Mutta works day to day as a mechanical engineer, working on car designs and engines. He is paid exceptionally well and is good at his job, inventing and developing cutting-edge car designs. But what may seem like a dream job to many still feels as though something is missing for Mutta. He still feels out of place, as if he isn't where he's supposed to be. After a dispute with his boss, he loses his job and is forced to move back home with his mother and father. And as his welcome wanes, he is forced to go job hunting. Rejection after rejection, Mutta concludes he must have gotten blackballed from the industry. Mutta's failure is directly opposed to his younger brother Hibito's success. Despite both starting in the same room with the same dream, they have both led such different lives. Mutta has to wonder, where did I go wrong? While his brother is about to become the first Japanese man to set foot on the moon, Mutta's childhood dreams of UFOs are replaced with the mundanity of a McDonald's Big Mac. 30 years old, unemployed, in his parents' house, while his brother is about to reach the moon, Mutta begins to wonder what he's been doing with his life. Hibito and Mutta have a precarious relationship as siblings. As the elder of the two, Mutta saw himself as having to lead the way, always staying one step ahead of his brother, showing him the way forward. As a result, Mutta had to be ahead of Hibito in academics, athletics, and especially in the dream the two boys shared to reach the moon. But it was because of this disposition that Mutta began to waver. Because he had to lead the way for his younger brother, he could no longer make a mistake. He placed an enormous amount of pressure on himself to be perfect. And when you don't allow yourself to make mistakes and to fail, you can't allow yourself to take chances and to take risks. And as Mutta began to mature, he realized the odds of becoming an astronaut were so stacked against him. He began to talk himself out of it. He began to tell himself that he didn't really want to become an astronaut or to go to the moon, that it was just a boyhood fantasy, a spur of the moment. He lied to himself. and he even attempted to talk Hibito out of their dream, advising him that such fantasies were just too unrealistic. But in reality, Mutta was afraid of failing. Not only would he fail to achieve his dream and his purpose for living, he would also be failing to lead the way and to guide his younger brother. Failing to become an astronaut would mean failing as an older brother. Ultimately, he spent so much time pretending to forget his dream that he actually did forget. And this is why Mutta's relationship with Hibito is so complex. Hibito serves as a reminder of the dream Mutta left behind, of the man he could have become. He feels pride and love towards his brother, such that he would go as far as to lose it all to defend him. But looking at Hibito and at himself fills Mutta with a sense of disappointment. Hibito reminds him of his failures, of how he gave up on his dream and gave up on himself. But where Mutta had long since given up on himself, Hibito had not. Just as Hibito had believed in himself, he also believes in Mutta, in the man he could become. Hibito even remarks that there was a Japanese man who was supposed to reach the moon before him, perhaps referencing his older brother, the one person who had matched his passion for space growing up. Hibito still has the idea of the real Mutta in his head, his older brother, who would always lead the way forward into the unknown. The energetic boy in amazement, wonder, and awe of that UFO, of the unknown waiting to be explored, and that promise that they made to each other that night to reach the moon. Exhausted from another day of failed job hunting, Mutta resigns himself to the comfort of his bed. He turns his head and sees a portrait of himself and his younger brother as children next to his boyhood hero, the famed astronaut Mori. He thinks back, and at that time he had met Mori, the impossible had happened. As he and Hibito were taking pictures with the picture of the framed astronaut, the real one had actually appeared. While his presence there already felt like an impossibility, what was more striking was the way he had embraced the two young boys. At that time, they felt as if he was encouraging them to do the impossible, just as he had. A text from Hibito, someone who will do the impossible, snaps Mutta back to reality. And upon Hibito's request, Mutta begins to go through old cassette tapes from his childhood. Mutta opens up a cassette tape with what may seem like a random date to the viewer, but which Mutta explains is a date and a recording that Hibito seemed to treasure for some reason, listening to the recording countless times. And upon listening to the tape, it transports Mutta to another time, where it was just him and his brother exploring the unknown boundaries of nature. Back when he didn't have a care in the world, no worries of finding jobs or paying bills, the world wasn't limited by what he could afford, or what society had predisposed for his role as an adult. His world was only limited by the boundaries of his imagination. By sound alone, he is able to relive the day where their world would expand even beyond that of the boundaries of planet Earth, when they had seen a UFO. It was that day that had transformed Hibito's life, setting him on the trajectory to become an astronaut. And as the UFO disappears into the moon, Hibito reveals something that is so intimate to each and every one of us. He reveals to Mutta his dream, to be an astronaut, telling Mutta that he believes he can make it to the moon. And without hesitation, he then asks Mutta what his dream is. And as child Mutta hesitates, even adult Mutta has no recollection of how he had responded. But as we will come to know in typical Mutta fashion, he gives a response that no one could have predicted. He tells Hibito that if he's going to the moon, he will stay one step ahead of him, and he will reach Mars. Adult Mutta is stunned. He's stunned at the boldness, the imagination, the creativity of his former self. And on that day, the two made a promise to reach their dreams and never give up. And this is what Hibito wanted. He wanted Mutta to have a conversation with himself, with his past self, to remember the promise they had made to each other as boys, and to remember who he is supposed to be. It's no wonder that Hibito went back to this tape relentlessly, as it served as a compass to redirect Hibito whenever life would try to derail him from his dreams, to remember his purpose and to be inspired by the grandness of his older brother's vision. Anytime he had doubts, anytime he tripped up or he felt lost, anytime people scoffed at his vision, there's no doubt he went back to this tape and his path became clear. And now he wants Mutta to remember and to keep his promise. But Mutta is stuck and lost. It's as if he's moving in quicksand. Despite encountering the vitality of his past self and rediscovering his dream, he's just no longer the person he used to be. His world is closed off, limited by doubt, regret, and fear. The word impossible has a tight grip around his heart. It closes him off. His world shrinks back to the boundaries of conformity and of normality. His perception limited by what he believes to be possible. There's no more freedom. Thus, he can only see what is directly in front of him. His life begins to be about staying busy and making ends meet. Simply jumping from dead-end job to dead-end job. He even wishes Hibito would forget their promise and not expect too much of him. His dream is so far from his current state that he doesn't even know where to begin. When our dreams are so diametrically opposed to our daily life, how do we even begin to take the first step? Many of us become overwhelmed at how monumentous our goals appear. It's like we're at the bottom of a mountain. We freeze and return to our comfort zone. We defeat ourselves by taking ourselves out of possibility and never even taking the first step. Never truly understanding what we're even capable of because we never even try. Despite obviously being qualified, Mutta still has doubts and hesitation. In a visit to his Aunt Sharon's, a famed astronaut who he's built a relationship with growing up, bonding over their shared love of space, he tells her that of the 315 applicants that were accepted to take the entry exam, only 2 or 3 will actually go on to become astronauts. What chance does he possibly have? Again, he says it's impossible. His self-talk is that of resignation to failure, as to avoid disappointment. But Aunt Sharon's response to this is ingenious. Like Hibito, she wants Mutta to also have a conversation with his past self. Along with space, music was also a deep passion she'd shared with the two brothers. She asks Mutta if he'd like to play the trumpet, to which Mutta responds that he's long since forgotten how to play. But this wasn't the first time she'd asked Mutta if he wanted to play music. she asked this same question to him when he was just a boy. But back then his response was very different. Mutta had responded that he'd like to play every instrument that she has, and ended up choosing the trumpet himself because it was the hardest instrument to play. A response that amazed her. Mutta's response at that time was to take on the biggest challenge he could find and overcome any obstacle. To do the impossible. Yet again, the people in Mutta's life are reminding him of the person he used to be. Thus, for Mutta, the trumpet symbolizes accepting the hardest challenge there is and overcoming the obstacles set out before you. It symbolizes doing the impossible. But there is one more thing Aunt Sharon must remind Mutta of. She encourages Mutta to play the trumpet despite having not played it for years. Even though he may play the wrong notes at times, even if he may appear like a fool to those around him, even if people won't know what he's doing or will tell him it can't be done, it's okay. As long as he finishes the song, that he has to make noise before he can make music. That he has to try and believe in himself in order to be the person he wants to be. Aunt Sharon tells Mutta that it's okay to fail, that he no longer has to be the perfect older brother who can't make a mistake. Failure is necessary if you want to grow as a person and achieve your dreams. That he no longer need be perfect. He need only continue onwards towards his shining star, like a rocket ship, barreling off towards his far-off dream, perfectly captured by the moon in the distance. Aunt Sharon transforms Mutta's mindset by rekindling the attitude that had been withered away over time. Mutta's journey is that of rediscovering the person you once were, of expanding your horizons, broadening them beyond the limits of what is deemed possible, into the realm of the unexplored and the impossible. And with only the drive to follow his dream, he takes the entry exam and he passes, becoming one step closer to his dream. Overjoyed, Mutta runs out into the street with trumpet in hand, and he begins to play as if he were a child again. He begins to play a tune with no melody, for a dream where he must walk where there are no roads. And at this point to the world, it may sound horrible. It may be riddled with mistakes, but for Mutta it represents a return to the person he used to be, and a chance for a new beginning. Mutta is a man who had long since traded in his spacesuit for a suit and tie. He is a man who had long since forgotten who he was meant to be. But what if one day you allowed yourself to return to that inner child? If you rediscovered the passion you had lost? If you allowed yourself to remember who you used to be? To remember the dream you had forgotten long ago? What would you do if the thing that had once engulfed your being, now a flicker reignited inside of you? If it became all you could think about again? Could you live with yourself if you didn't pursue your dream? If you didn't stay true to yourself? If you didn't do what they say you couldn't? If you didn't try to become the man you always wanted to be? If you can understand this yearning for completion, then you can begin to understand the journey of the astronaut known as Namba Mutta.